Hello, hello, and welcome back to Kathie's Coaching Podcast, also on YouTube. And today I have a very special guest. We are going to be talking about sports psychology and mental performance. And I'm going to introduce you to my special guest. His name is Gary. And let's get right down to it. Please, Gary, introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do and what we're going to talk about today.
Sure. Well, my name is Gary Chupik. I'm from Seattle, Washington, born in Canada, actually, and I'm a dual citizen. But I've been in Seattle here 33 years, and love brought me south of the border. Met my wife, and really excited to share a little bit of my journey, and hopefully it'll be of some value to your audience. The journey towards sports psych for me was quite sort of a tenuous one, and I actually didn't plan on doing sports psych, but I ended up meeting the right people at the right time. And that's so often how life works, doesn't it? And I've been in leadership for about 30 years. And so I've had the opportunity to lead in nonprofit organizations and for-profit organizations. And so I never really sort of aspired to be a leader. It just feels like it was heaped on me. And I think when you live your life with character and integrity, and you're a responsible person and you're hardworking, that the opportunities actually come to you. And so every time that happened, I pretty much said yes to everything. And especially when you're younger and you're a sponge, you're just like trying to take in and have as many experiences as you can. And so for me, it was just saying yes to most things and then seeing where life was going to take me. So I ended up spending about 28 years in the ministry as a pastor, and led from a local congregation to regionally to nationally. So I have a lot of experience in leadership, but my primary mode of helping people, even from the platform, has always been coaching people. So giving people choices, giving people options. It's more like, well, what do you think you should do instead of here's what you should do. And I never liked telling. I just like asking good questions. And so even on the platform, that's been my style.
Wow, I love that. And you coach a lot like I do. I've been a personal trainer since 2002, and I've always led with no cookie cutter program. I don't believe that that's going to be efficient or helpful to the person you're working with. And I like how you use that philosophy. There's always opportunities. And I think when we lead with that mindset, it makes a big difference. So, how did you get into sports psychology? And let's talk a little bit about that and leadership as well, because leadership is a great quality to have in any position you're in as a company. And it's always something I like to talk about and coach as well. And obviously you do too. So let's talk about that.
Well, there's multiple levels to this thing. I grew up an athlete, thinking like an athlete. I grew up in a family of 5 boys, and you can imagine that it was as competitive as what you might think it would be. And we were fighting for sweets and fighting for food and fighting for this and fighting for that. So it grew up pretty competitive, and then played some high school and a little bit of college football. And and so I sort of grew up with the competitor's mindset right from the very beginning. And then being in ministry for so long, and I had it's interesting now I just kind of am becoming more aware of it. Yeah. Saying yes to everything is a sort of a perfect cocktail for burnout. And so I mismanaged myself when I was in the ministry, and I said yes to too many things and led to a burnout. There wasn't a moral failure or anything like that. I just ran out of gas. I just was doing too many things and not doing anything well. And I feel like happy, like uh, I needed a different language in my life because as you can imagine, after 30 years of leading and, doing, marriage counseling and counseling people and just helping people be their best selves, you sort of get familiar with the language, and maybe sometimes too familiar. And so when I had my burnout, one of the things that I discovered was a book by Trevor Moawad that was called It Takes What It Takes. And he was a sports site guy, and he was the best in the world at the time. And I say at the time because he passed away a couple of years ago in his late 40s, early 50s. But he, it made an impact on me. And so one day I was just hanging out at a football practice, and somebody said, "Hey, do you know Trevor Moawad?" And at that time, Trevor was on ESPN, and ABC, television network. I mean, he was everywhere, and commanding big prices for speeches and talks and whatever. And so someone said, "Hey, do you know Trevor?" And I said, "No, I don't." He said, "Would you like to meet him? I can set you up with him." And I was like, "Get out of here, no way!" Like, and so I got introduced to him, and we just kind of hit it off, and so he said, "Hey, would you like to meet next month?" And I was like, "Man, would I?" And at that time, I had been studying sports psych just to help myself through burnout. And so I'd conservatively put in 1,000 hours in the previous 12 months just studying sports psych. My wife and kids would go to bed and I would like read for 3 hours just about sports psych because it was healing me. And so I just gobbled it all up, and it just sort of touched the competitor's nerve in me, and I used it to get out of burnout, and that's the simplest way I could do that. And then the next meeting I had with Trevor said, "Hey, Gary, you know a lot about sports psych. This is pretty impressive. Why don't you put together a plan? Like, how would you help an athlete? And take me through the sequence of how you would help an athlete." And so he said, "Make sure it's in a picture and make sure there's very little writing. I want to see it visually so that I can understand what's in your mind." And so the next time we met, I wrote it all out and he literally hired me on the spot for his company, which was like a complete shock. I had no idea that was going to happen. And so I ended up working for his company with Russell Wilson, quarterback for the Seattle Seahawks. I worked for their company for a couple of years, taking sports mental training into the business world. So yeah, it was quite a weird, odd journey there. But I do believe that, sometimes we don't get to choose our classrooms. Sometimes they're chosen for us. And our job is to pass the class. And whether that's a relationship or some type of difficult circumstance in your life, let's pass the test so that we can move on to the next thing, because we're bound to repeat it if we don't. So I just sort of have that attitude, like what's next and how do I be the very best person I can be? And so that's how I started in the industry. And then for the last few years, I've been on my own and had this sort of crazy ride from, being local again to being regional to national, now international, traveling, speaking around the world.
Wow, I absolutely love that. And what I really want to hone in on here, and I want my audience to hear, is notice how the opportunity just presented itself. He did not force anything in that conversation, and it just presented itself. To me, when you're taking care of yourself and you're relaxing into the flow, the opportunities just come in. It's the same thing. I met Gary the same way. It's just we just kind of connected, and I really love his message, and I'm going to talk about something that he coaches that I really want to hone in on. But yes, burnout can happen and you not even know that it's going on. And
Yes.
then what happened with Gary was he stepped back and he started studying sports psychology. And this is something that I do too. I geek out on books and certain topics and I just really get into it. And so our content is very related, and that's how Gary and I met. And then when we started talking, I was like, whoa, this is very, very powerful. So I want to talk about a post that I saw on your Instagram, and it says resilience isn't an exercise, it's an outcome. And it's multiple mental and emotional skills. So I want to break this down because resilience isn't an exercise, it's an outcome. And you think about burnout, when we hit burnout, you're going to have to build resilience. It's like building a muscle, and it's not an exercise, it's an outcome. And then he mentioned it's multiple mental and emotional skills. So let's break that down because this is very, very powerful and very profound. So tell us about how you can kind of tell from Gary's story about meeting that guy that he built resilience, and it wasn't just an exercise, it was a process of multiple mental and emotional skills. So break that down for us.
Yeah. Yeah. So the most important thing I think that the most important issue or topic that when we're talking about resilience is it's a very odd topic to actually mention, but I think it's actually right. And that is alignment. Because when we're aligned with so many different things, I can talk about, like, I have something called the game plan for life. And if I was to wrap up in one word what the game plan for life was, which is a 2-day experience that I provide for my clients. They either fly to Seattle or I fly to them. Um, and it's about alignment. So it's alignment in your identity. So you got to figure out who you are. You're a certain tool. Think of yourself as a tool, and you're a certain tool with a specific purpose. And for example, you could say, well, I'm a hammer. Well, did you know that there are 12 different kinds of hammers? And so knowing with precision your identity is so important to resilience, because then you're not trying extra hard to be somebody that you're not, or do something that's out of your sort of your sweet spot or your high contribution zone. And so finding out who you are is like number one. And that's why I teach something called identity-based mental performance. Because if you are who you really are, it's actually not that hard. We just make it really difficult. Sometimes it's our ambition. Like we think, oh, I'd really love to do this with my life. Well, yeah, I'd love to be linebacker for the new, for the Seattle Seahawks. But I'm not, that's not an alignment for me. I don't have the physical attributes to be able to do that, nor do I have some of the mental and emotional attributes. It takes a special kind of person to be able to do that kind of thing. So alignment is key. And then the second thing is finding your purpose. And I think that's a weird word for a lot of people. That's very nebulous and maybe ethereal in lots of ways, but you can know your purpose down to the very word. And so that's something that I lead people through these exercises. And then you have identity, purpose, then you have your calling. That's what should I do with my life? And it really answers that question. Like, yeah, there's a lot of things you can do. Um, but who are you just when you're fully aligned? And could you just fully surrender to the way that you've been aligned? And when you surrender to the way that you have been aligned, then you can kind of go, okay, I'm ready to be the kind of hammer that I've been created to be. And then you have identity, purpose, calling, and you have a vision for your life. Like, where do you see yourself? Okay, what do you see in your future for your life? And then you have assignments. Those are the current assignments that you have. So you might have, this season of my life, this is my current assignment. This season of my life, this is my current assignment. This is the season of my life, this is my current assignment. And then you have a personal philosophy, which is how you should wake up every day in order to accomplish your purpose, your calling, your vision, and your assignments. And so how do I need to wake up every day? And so I quote my personal philosophy every day. And then you have execution. What's a simple way, because simple is the key. What's a simple way that is just me? It's not somebody else. It's me, that I can execute all of this. And if you put all of that together, you have something what I call whole life excellence. And I think done are the days where athletes, they're excellent at one thing, but their lives are train wrecks in all the other different domains of their life. And so I teach whole life excellence, that you can be good at everything. It's actually a state of mind, right? It's a mindset. So I think the key really is alignment. And so when we circle back to the idea of resilience and burnout, and resilience being an outcome. Yeah, you sometimes when you have burnout, it's like a ball of yarn, and it's a tangled ball of yarn. And what we try and do is we try and pull it all apart at the same time. And then we just make things tighter because we don't know what to do. Instead of just starting with one strand and say, okay, I gotta untangle this one area of my life. I need to work on it. And then you untangle it. Now you're a little bit more free. And then you take another strand and you're a little bit more free. And I think as you keep building and untangling those strands, just like with burnout, when you just say, okay, I'm going to work on this one thing, and then I'll go on to the next thing, and then I'll go on to the next thing. I think you have a really good shot at overcoming burnout. And as you well said, is sometimes it's unrecognizable. And what it looked like in me was I was lacking joy and happiness and motivation, and which is not me because I'm a highly motivated individual. And so for me, it was like, man, I don't know what excites me anymore. And so I thought that I would never walk with a spring in my step again. But it just started the journey of like, okay, let's get the emotional regulation down. Let's get married to simplicity again. Okay. Let's talk about the difference between positivity and optimism. And there's a huge difference. And I'm a big fan of optimism rather than positivity. And so it's just sort of putting together all these little tiny, untangling all these little strands that really helped me through burnout. And that sports psych was a great way to do that.
Wow. Okay. There's a lot there. And I want to state this right here, right now. On every episode I do, I include a blog post and I put it in the link in the show notes and the description below. And inside that blog post, you'll be able to break down and see all these steps that he took because I'm also sitting here taking notes. And then I'm going to break that down where and explain it a little bit where, because that's a lot to unpack, but if you look at this, I like how he calls it a game plan for life because that's all sports psychology is. It's a game plan for life. And the reason why an athlete that you love and adore makes it look so easy is because he's in the zone. He's in flow state. And everything that Gary just mentioned is getting you into flow state where the challenge meets the skill and it becomes easy because you're aligned, because you're doing what you love to do. You've got your purpose, you understand it deeply. But a lot of times, what happens is we complicate things. And I love how he talked about positivity and optimism because we complicate things by that ball of yarn. It's all tightened, and we just got burnt out with overthinking and overanalyzing, and that's where positivity can become toxic. You've heard the words toxic positivity. I actually do not like that word because I think it's an oxymoron. But when you look at it as more optimism and you try to find your alignment, he broke it down so simply. Find your alignment, find your purpose, understand it. And I want to ask Gary about this because he said break your purpose down into one word. So how how do we do that?
Yeah. Either one word or one sentence. So really how you do that, there's an exercise I do called the self-scouting report. So it's really trying to put together, it takes about an hour to do, but it asks a series of 9 questions. And as you begin to get formulate an idea and you write down your responses, and they're one word responses, but as you begin to formulate sort of the talent and the heart, which is the key to finding your purpose. So you have a natural talent and you need to determine what the talent is. So it could be a couple bullet points or a sentence, but you have to actually understand what your talent is. So talent is clarity, like having clarity about what you're good at. Then the heart is your conviction. And those are the things that really drive your passion and almost even make you emotional. Because if you're not emotional when it comes to your purpose, you kind of don't have it yet. You're not there yet. And so what we want to do is connect the electrical arc between the clarity, which is our mind, and our heart, which is our conviction. So when we can connect that electrical arc, then we have magic because I'm clear about what I'm good at and I know that I'm good at that and I'm passionate about it. And then you just surrender to that and you just say, let's go. And then you spend the rest of your life just sort of exploring and discovering what it means to be you. And I think that's so important because like with the game plan for life, it's 2 days. And I tell people, you can figure everything out in 2 days, or you can spend the rest of your life trying to figure it out. And so what if we just spent 2 days together and you can figure out all of those different things and you could have a game plan for your life. And then you can spend the rest of your life just saying, "Oh, I wonder how far I can take my life, given who I am and what my talent and ability is and what my convictions are. I wonder how far I can go." And so for me, a lot of my life is living out of the overflow of my game plan and thinking, "Oh, how can I just like take this to the max?" And so every time I get a crazy opportunity, like I spoke at an AI conference, spoke in Madrid last year, I spoke to the FBI last year as well. It's just like, how do these opportunities come to me? But I think it comes back to let's see how far I can take and live out of the overflow of how I'm wired.
Yeah, I love that, and because that's exactly where I wanted to go. I want to circle back to the opportunity and the door that opened when you met the author, Trevor
Trevor
Moawad, right? Right.
Mowad. Yeah.
So, you can kind of see how this is all working, how it worked in Gary's life. And he also used the word magic. And I love that because I promise you, if you start to find your purpose and you get in alignment and you untangle that ball of yarn, it will seem like magic. The things that happen are like magic. And on top of that, when he talks about the heart and the talent being aligned, it makes it so simple and so easy that it's just you're going to look back and you're gonna go, how did that happen? And
Exactly.
and it's magic is what it is. So I want to circle back to when you met that author that of that book and how that worked, because that kind of feels like how I met you and the magic that happened there, because I'm really inspired by your journey. So, like, let's hone in on that.
Yeah, it was pretty fascinating. And you know, when you align yourself, as you're mentioning that, magic happens every step of the way. Something magical happened, and it's amazing because I was thinking to myself, and this is here's a lesson I think that's for all of us is when I was first starting out, I thought, oh well, I'll go to my local high school. My daughter, is goes to that high school, and I'll go to the high school football team, and so I was just watching a practice and someone came and walked up to me and introduced himself and he ended up becoming a good friend. And I thought I just wanted to serve. I just wanted to put myself in a position just to sort of be around sports again, going through my, recovery from my burn. I just need to be around sports again. And so I thought, well, maybe my local high school coach would be interested. And he was, but he wasn't super interested. But the gentleman that I met there, just because I wanted to serve, because I wanted to like share my knowledge and share who I was and live out of that overflow. He was the guy that ended up introducing me to Trevor. And so it was out of that, just like, let's take a step and just let's go live out who I think I'm supposed to live out. And then, yeah, he introduced me. And then he was the guy. It was like, yeah, I know Trevor and I know the family. And would you like to meet him one day? And that's how it started, was just on a high school football practice field. And then and then ever since then, like my life has taken dramatic turns. And you talk about magic, like my whole life is like that right now. And it's magical. And I have 30 stories I can share about magical moments where, so there's a strange opportunity and I say yes to it. And sometimes as you get older and you get more opportunities, you can't chase every antelope, right? If you're a lion, like you just sort of have to pick your one. Um, but there's just been so many, like I did my very first podcast. I probably did, I don't know, probably 3 years ago or so. My very first one, never done one before. It was terrible. I was terrible. It had like 13 listeners or something like that. And it was this high school kid in Miami. And he was doing this podcast and he was like, I want to enter the podcast game and I want it to be cool. And so he looked me up and he called me and asked me, and I'd never been on a podcast before. And that high school student changed the course of my life because one of his 13 listeners was a guy in Utah going across a desert in Utah, and he was listening to it. And he said, and he looked me up and he called me. He said to me, "Hey, I'm in Knoxville, Tennessee, speaking at the time." And he's like, "Hey, can you make it to Provo, Utah?" I'm like, "Who are you? Like, what do you mean come to Provo? Why would I come to Provo, Utah tomorrow?" Like he's asking me to change my flights from Seattle, go to all from this like high school kids podcast. And he says, well, I'm representing a gentleman and he's putting on a conference. We want you to attend the conference. I said, what kind of a conference is it? He said, it's real estate. I'm like, I know nothing about real estate, And so he said, can you just come? And I said, okay, I'll do it. And I ended up flying to Provo, Utah, and not knowing why I was there and not knowing what would come of it. And I'm supposed to meet with the speaker, the main guy. And I don't know why he wanted to meet with me. And so I'm standing there listening to the speaker, and there's, 1,000 people there. And this guy walks up to me, he goes, "Hey, are you flipping houses? Are you buying real estate? Like, what are you doing?" I'm like, "I don't know why I'm here." And he goes, "What do you mean you don't know why you're here?" And I'm like, "I literally do not know why I'm here." And he couldn't wrap his head around why I didn't know why I was there. And then he said, "Well, who invited you?" And I said, "Well, the Chris, the speaker." And he goes, "Chris?" And I'm like, "Yeah." He goes, "Why did he invite you?" And I said, "I don't know. I literally don't know." And so, make a long story short, he says, this guy that I'm standing beside, he says, "Hey, would you mind if I gave you a call tomorrow?" And I said, "Sure, why not? Here's my car." He asked me a few weeks later, he said, "If I gave you $100,000, would you coach me for a year?" And I said, "Probably," you know? So I ended up coaching him, and then opened up a whole new web of relationships and experiences. And I had never really been to Vegas before. I've been to Vegas like 15 times in the last couple of years, just, you know, working with companies, working with high performers, and speaking at conferences all over America and the world. And, this guy has changed the course of my life, and all because of a 18-year-old who did a podcast, and someone in Utah was listening. And I've done some work with them, but and the funny thing about that is that, we're, as coaches, we're super inspired by our clients who take action. And so my second or third session with this guy, I'm in Vegas. He has a glass, wall for his office, and I'm coaching him. And about 10 or 20 minutes into the session, he asked me to leave his office out of just like that. And I was like, "Oh, that was sort of abrupt." And I sat in the foyer for a while, and about 10 or 15 minutes later, he waved me back in, and he said, "You just made me $1.2 million." And I said, "What? What happened?" And he said, "No, I just needed a mindset change, and I made a decision, and it made me $1.2 million." And he said, "You're a great deal at $100,000. I'll take that any day of the week." And I was just like, "Oh my gosh, like, I can't believe it that this is actually happening." And so yeah, though, just aligning and surrendering and taking one step, just take the next step, and you have no idea what can happen.
Wow. Wow. I absolutely love that story. And here is it is in a nutshell. It's like trust the process and go with your heart and listen to it. And all of my mentors share this same exact story about how they just went with something that was random and they turned into an investment that would turned over and turned over and turned over. And I have like 5 different mentors that have all said the same thing. And it made me realize there is magic in this, and you just have to trust it. You just got to let go and go with the flow. In sports psychology, that is just flow state. Just get with it. And I
Yeah.
talk about this all the time.
Yeah.
So I I love oh my gosh, I love this episode. I promise you we're gonna have Gary back on very, very soon because his wisdom is just like I love it. So before we go, if there's anything else you'd like to add today, I really appreciate you being here today. And I know that the magic happens. It's gonna be wonderful. So
Yeah.
what else?
No, thank you for that. No, I would say, I learned to never trust the process. Um, what I learned is to attack the process.
Oh, I like it.
That trusting the process is passive, but when you know what you need to do, and it's the right plan, and it's the right process, then you need to attack it. And that's the sports part of, the sports psych part of me, because too many people just say, "Well, guess I got to trust something, and I can sit back and sort of wait, and maybe something will happen, maybe it won't, or whatever." But trusting is too passive for me. I think when we attack the process, great things happen.
And that is so obvious in the way he handled that situation where he attacked the process. I thank you for that mindset shift because I've always said trust the process, but now I'm going to say attack the process with trust because there is that there. And if you don't attack it, you're going to miss out on that. And just think for a moment if Gary didn't actually attack the process and just go. And what's he doing here? And he has somebody asking him. And another thing that I put myself in his shoes is when that guy told you to leave his office, what went through your mind at that very moment? Were you like, did I do something wrong or
Yeah,
what?
I literally thought that I had said something wrong and that he was upset about something, or he's an extremely busy businessman. And so I thought, well, maybe he had a meeting, and maybe he forgot. And, sometimes guys like that are checking their phone or checking their emails or whatever. But yeah, I thought I had done something wrong. So I literally did not know what was going on. And so it was pretty perplexing to me. However, I learned a lot from him. Like, for example, like I would say that he was so obsessed with being successful. He was like going to do everything it took. And I remember asking him about a current event happening in the world, which was like super obvious to almost the whole world. And he was like, I have no idea. I'm like, how could you not have any idea that this is going on in the world? And he was just like, I'm just focused on what I'm doing. And it really taught me that, yeah, I can be that focused as well. So yeah, there's a lot of lessons. And I would say that finally, for your listeners, that was a great example of something that I call inspired action. So there's action, but there's inspired action, and there's a difference. And so what he did, I mean, think about it. Like oftentimes when we're working with clients, we just think, well, we'll give them a week to work on it, or 2 weeks, or next month, or 5 days, or 3 days. This guy didn't wait a minute. He literally interrupted a session to go do what he thought that he should do. That's how eager he was to learn. And had he not taken action right then and there, I wonder if it ever would have happened at all. And so this idea of inspired action, take inspired action as quickly as possible. And I think as coaches, I don't know we're challenging enough. Like there's a guy who is like putting into practice, like the session's not even done, and I've learned to say to my clients, listen, you got 72 hours, make this massive decision or massive change. And they're like, wait a minute, I need more time. I'm like, okay, maybe if it's the bigger the decision, but man, if you don't put something into practice within 72 hours, you're probably not going to do it. And so I think putting a little bit of a time frame and sort of squeezing a little bit and pressing a little bit can be really good for our clients, because imagine what the learning process is for them if they take inspired action. They're like, success loves speed. Success loves speed. And when we wait and we hesitate and we're slow to respond to things, opportunities pass us by, or it loses energy or emotion. And so success loves speed, and taking inspired action, I think, can be really helpful to our clients.
Yeah, and you did that. You took inspired action and just went and sat with the at the high school football field. You took inspired action by just taking that flight to Utah, and you're an inspiration. I love it. And I thank you so much for being here today. I learned a lot. I hope my audience learned a lot, and you know, uh, 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 yes, that's that. I'm just going to stop right there because I already can think of other things I want to talk to you
Oh,
about.
we'll just have to have another
Yeah,
podcast.
we'll have to because I've just gone 5 minutes over our time.
That's all.
So that's it. And thank you all for tuning in today. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. I trust you did. And until next time, we'll see you next time. Thank you, Gary, for being here today.